Okay, thank you very much. I will start now talking about the Spanish situation. I have personally invited to this conference the Spanish ambassador, but I hope he's not here, because if not, he will ask for my passport after I speak, and I don't know if I will be able to be allowed back into the country. Well, the Spanish situation is a very dramatic one. The Spanish government and the Spanish political parties talk about what they call the Spanish recession. Actually, they like to say that we had a first recession soon after the fall of Lehman Brothers in 2008, 2009, and a second recession last year, that is in 2012. The government is now saying that this second recession is coming to an end, that there are signs of recovery in the economy. In this, the political parties of the opposition totally disagree. For the opposition, which is the Socialist Party now in the opposition, the main party of the opposition, we are still in a recession, and the signs of recovery only exist in the mind of the government officials. As the Minister of Economy says that there are indications of what he calls green sprouts, the opposition leaders play jokes saying that it must be in the private garden of the Ministry of Economy and nowhere else. But let's look to the Spanish reality. We have, according to the last figures of 2 days ago, we have 6,200,000 jobless people. 6,200,000 jobless people. It's a rate of 27% of the labor force. 27%. The rate for young people, the unemployed young people, is of 52% of jobless young men and women. Only Greece exceeds this rate of 52% of the young people. The unemployment in Spain is one of the largest in the world, and certainly the largest in the developed countries. It has more unemployment than many African countries, much more. The prognosis of the International Monetary Fund differs also from that of the Spanish government. According to the International Monetary Fund, the fall in the GDP will continue, and the unemployment rate will reach 28% in 2014. I think we are going to reach 28% this year, but that is what the International Monetary Fund is saying. There are about 1 million families with all its members jobless, living on charity and eating in the public places opened mainly by the Catholic Church, with long queues at the door, queues of 100 meters, 200 meters of people waiting to eat. There are at least several 100,000 families living on the miserable dole of one of its members. 400 euros a month, 600 euros, and all the family lives with that. The streets of Madrid, Barcelona, and other important cities are full of beggars and people sleeping in the streets. In the small rooms of the banks open by night to withdraw money with credit cards, you may find not one, but 2 or 3 people sleeping. Nobody told me this. I have seen it. The GDP has been falling slowly, but in a persistent way. The confidence of the markets in the Spanish economy is the lowest in recent Spanish history. And the government that needs desperately to borrow has to pay interest rate always near to the 5%. When it's 4.90, they're happy, but nearly it's always 5% or even more. The central government and the autonomous communities delayed payments of purveyors for up to 5 or 6 months, when they pay at all, because sometimes they simply do not pay. Salaries have gone down, and in spite of what is quite usual, in spite of that, it's quite usual that companies delay the payment to the workers for 2 or 3 months. As you may imagine, unemployed people have, in thousands of cases, not been able to pay the mortgages on the homes. Daily evictions and repossessions are to be seen all over Spain. Many people committed suicide when facing the eviction, others has to be dragged out of the homes by the police. The situation has been so stressing that many locksmiths called to change the locks of evicted houses declined to do it. They say they cannot stand it. The police unions declared that many policemen need psychological support to obey the orders to evict people. That is the dramatic situation. There is no bank credit for small and medium-sized companies. Credit has absolutely disappeared, and as a consequence, shops and small business are closing daily and for good. The banks, even those nationalized, use the money they receive at 1% or 0.5% interest from the European Central Bank, not to give credit to the companies or individuals, but to pay to buy Spanish state bonds with a premium of 4.5% or 5%. So they buy bonds instead of lending money to the people. And of course, they always distribute benefits. Now, I put forward this question. Is this a recession? The answer is no. This is not a recession. It's a painful and long depression. How it is possible that the fourth largest economy in Europe has come to this disastrous situation? Because it is a depression, not a recession. The answer is there for those that really wish to see it. The Spanish depression has been originated in land speculation. The price of property has increased approximately 1,000% since 1980. 1,000% since 1980, up to the beginning of the crisis. The national income available at market prices per inhabitant increased since 1980 at 350%. That means that incomes increased 3.5 times, with the price of property increased 10 times. Property became unaffordable, but the banks, with the usual generosity, gave 30 or 40 years mortgages to pay these incredible prices. You had to work all your life to own what you should have at the beginning of your working life. The Spanish politicians and the Spanish media talk constantly and blame the situation to the speculation with the brick. They talk of the brick, they don't talk of the land. Some intentionally do this to confuse, not to clarify. Others do the same, not with intention, but with ignorance. We know that the bricks, the materials, do not increase in value. They start to lose value as soon as the building is finished. We know, and it is obvious, that what increases in price is not the material, but the land. It is a devastating land speculation that has taken Spain to this disastrous situation. How? Because the taxes on the rent of land and the taxes on the plus values are in Spain insignificant. The politicians do not mention this. The average rate of property tax in Spain is about 0.6% of an assessed capital value that represents at most 50 or maximum 60% of the market value. And when they talk about solutions to the speculation with bricks, as they call it, they say ridiculous things. They don't talk really of land. They say anything. It happens what Henry George said in A Perplexed Philosopher. And I will repeat the words of George. That thought on social questions is so confused and perplexed that the aspirations of great bodies of men, deeply though vaguely conscious of injustice, are in all civilized countries being diverted to futile and dangerous remedies, is largely due to the fact that those who assume and are credited with superior knowledge of social and economic law have devoted their powers not to showing where the injustice lies, but to hiding it, not to clearing common thought, but to confusing it. In this way, in Spain, the fallacy that the speculation is with brick passes as the truth. And the land is forgotten. Nobody talks about the land, only me. When I go to the indignados in Puerta del Sol and I talk in the economic room, I always say it's not the bricks, it's the land, and they agree. But then they forgot. They forgot the land is not mentioned in universities. Spain is an empty country. It has 93 inhabitants per square kilometer. Germany has 230, Holland 497, Belgium 365, Japan 337, the United Kingdom 260, Taiwan 645. Singapore has 7,546 inhabitants per square kilometer, and Hong Kong has 7,173 inhabitants per square kilometer. How it is possible then that in an empty country like Spain, it's more difficult to buy a home than in Singapore or Germany or Taiwan? The only answer is because all the economic policy has been directed not to prevent land speculation, but to favor it. In benefit of whom? In benefit of the banks, the monopolist capital, and the corrupted politicians. Because we all know, and it's now public, that corruption in Spain has been rampant, and black money came in 90% from land deals and property deals. Now the treasurer of the ruling party has been discovered that he has 48 million euros in Switzerland, in Swiss accounts. But he was an employee of the party, and he cannot explain from where the money came. So everybody thinks, well, it's the money of the party. It's the money of they robbed. But he doesn't admit that because he wants to keep the money. If he says the money is for the party, he will have to give it away. So he has just recognized that only 8 million were from the party. What they did with this money, they distributed in between the leaders of the party in closed envelopes. So they get money from corruption, from land deals, from construction projects. They get these illegal commissions, and then they distribute it in between the leaders of the party. It's unbelievable. There were some attempts to correct the situation, but they failed. The main one that unfortunately backfired was the law approved by the conservative government of Aznar, Law number 6 of 3rd April 1998. It declared that all land was able to be urbanized, exception made of that expressly declared not up for urbanization. The theoretical intention was to bring more land to the market and as a consequence push the prices down. But the law passed many powers to the autonomous communities that left the process of urbanizing land in the hands of the so-called urbanizing agents. Or there was a name with gestores del suelo, they call it in Spain, people managing the land. The role of these urbanizing agents fell into the hands of the banks and speculative capitals that instead of allowing the access of land to the market, they restricted. Once in the hand of the agent, land increased 10 or more times in value, sometimes 15 times or 20 times in value. The price of land increased exponentially and represented in the final product, the house or the flat, 50% or even 60% of the market price of the property. Who financed this? Of course, the banks, originating a spiral that was bound to end in a crash. And the crash came, and Spain is facing the consequences. And what are the ruling classes doing? Looking for viable solutions? Of course not. They are simply waiting for a new spiral to start again, so that the whole process would be repeated. This is the sad history of the origin of the Spanish Depression. So what do we need in Spain? We need a new political thinking, bringing to the political arena the always valid ideas of Henry George, his most brilliant advocate, but also shared by other great economists as Hermann Henry Gossen and John Walras, and in our days by Mason Gaffney and Fred Harrison. And of course, with difference which are not essential and that imply a return to George, also by Joseph Stiglitz. We have to make land common property by taxing to the maximum the rent of land and natural resources. Okay. I give you the...
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to have a conversation. Let's see, we go till 11. So please, let's talk. You know, give your comments. I mean, I had read Fernando's paper. He sent it to me, sent the revised version, and I'm still shocked to hear the information on Spain. It seems to me we're not hearing about it in the media very much. Is that your impression?
Yes.
And we have to ask, why aren't we hearing about this terrible crisis in Spain? We're hearing about Greece and other places. It's not getting out. Somehow the media, wonder why that is. The media, you know? So please, ask questions, let's talk. I want to see some hands here. Nick.
Fernando,
Yes.
I wonder how aware people are who can't afford houses of the causes of their difficulties.
They are aware in a very general way. They don't know exactly the reason, because the problem of land speculation is hidden. They talk of speculation with the bricks, with the houses, but really the speculation was with the land. It's the price of the land that increased the value of the property, not the price of the bricks, it's only the price of the land. So people is vaguely aware, but all the media are not talking of the land problem. They are talking in a general way of land speculation, but they don't even propose measures to stop it. They don't propose to tax plus values heavily or to implement a tax on the rent of land. They don't talk. They say, well, we have to stop this crazy situation of that everybody wants to buy property. But how? They don't say how. So people, it's like Henry George said, it's very vaguely knowing that something is wrong. But the people who should show to them where is the problem, they hide it. They don't disclose it.
Is there any possibility of changing that through social media? Through social media, Facebook, the internet?
Well, another writer who shared the ideas of Henry George, although he was not supporting land taxation, he was supporting land nationalization, was the liberal economist Léon Walras, the French economist. And Léon Walras said something that I think is true, that the system has deformed the teaching in universities. So even the leftist people coming out of the universities, they don't speak of the land. They live it. They live it. Land is not there. Houses are hanging in the air. Land is not there. The teachings in university are so deformed that people don't have the answers. And the problem is that when you go and say the truth, everything, as Léon Walras said it will happen, everything is going to be blocked to you. Because the ruling classes know that that is the problem. But from there is where the money is coming. All the black money, the millions of money that has been robbed in Spain come from the land deals. Incredible amounts of money. I have a friend that was a lawyer in one of the city halls near Madrid. They called him the money collector of the mayor, because he went everywhere collecting the bribes from people. And finally, he was put in jail. They asked for him to deposit some money to get free. I don't know, the name is fianza, to deposit money to get free. They asked him to deposit 1 million euros. He deposited 1 million euros. And suddenly, 1 year after, he published a book, How to Be a Young Successful Entrepreneur. I couldn't believe it. Well, the way to be a successful entrepreneur is stealing money. And he published the book, and he invited me to the presentation. Well, that is the mentality. That is the mentality. I don't think through the media we can find a solution. We need people saying the truth. I am fighting in the movement, in the economic group of the 15 indignados. I'm fighting, I'm saying the truth. They hear what I say. And they change some things, and they put this about land. It's interesting what you said, it's different, nobody said it. And then they put it. But it's very slow. We have, against this, we have all the media that never speak of land. Not even the Socialist Party, they don't speak of land. The third book of the Capital of Marx is dedicated in a great part of the book to land. Marx was an admirer of the physiocrats. He said they were very talented people. And he said he realizes that the tax that the physiocrats promoted, the single tax, was an anti-capitalist tax, because he said, Marx is saying, well, they are nationalizing land. But then he began, well, but they were monarchic, but he was an admirer of the physiocrats. But the people from the left don't read the third volume of the Capital. They read only the first and the second, and then they ignore the land problem because it's in the third one. Although, if you look carefully in the second volume of the Capital, Marx also talks of land. For Marx was very clear. The land monopoly is the basic of the capitalist monopoly. And then when he proposes measure in the Communist Manifesto, the first measure he proposes is to nationalize land and take the rent for public purposes. But the left are in the air. They have been deformed by the teaching in universities. Okay, I think it was another question, yes?
What percentage of people in Spain own their own homes?
Sorry?
What percentage of people own their own homes and so are getting a piece of the action? And how has the government avoided defaulting on its debt?
Well, first you have to understand that Spain is a country with 80% of the people own the properties. And now the government is scared because people is committing suicide, evictions. Now they are in the hands of the banks and the urbanizers. There are about from 800,000 to 1 million empty flats that cannot be sold or rented because people don't have money to rent or to buy. So that is the situation in an empty country. 800,000 empty houses. Can you believe that? In a country with 93 inhabitants per square kilometer, people cannot have a home. That is the situation.
Can you say by any chance, Fernando, with regard to what proportion of these owner-occupiers, what proportion, if possible, either numbers or value, is actually mortgage, is actually the beneficial owner, is actually the bank?
Yes, I put that question to myself. It was originally from the bank, but people owning property in Spain, Spain has been like that for decades. Mm. So there are many people who own the property without mortgages. Mm-hmm. I would say at least 50 or 60% of the people own the properties without mortgages. So they were happy when property prices were rising. Mm. The problem is for those that have to buy now, or that had to buy in the moment of the peak of the bubble. Mm. But there is a great number of people owning the house without mortgages.
So if that's the case, yes. What we're dealing with is an interested party that represents, if I've understood you correctly, 50% of 80%, i.e. 40% of all householders have a landed interest.
Yes, have a landed interest, absolutely.
Which does make the challenge rather
difficult. Very difficult. You are fighting against the interests of the people.
It does identify the interest that is opposed to the truth.
Yeah. For example, I was talking to the movement, to the 15, it's called the 15 movement in 15M, I think. And then there was one of the members, and I began to speak about land taxation. And he said, no, because the tax on my flat is very high. I said, how much is the tax on your flat? Well, he said the figure, and then I demonstrated to him that was the lowest in the world, maybe at 0.3% of the real value. But they don't like it. Those who are owners and they don't have mortgages, they don't like to be taxed. So our ideas are very difficult to introduce and very difficult to impose. We have to fight against the media, against the ignorance, and against the interest of people owning property. How do you do that? I really don't know. This is a question to be answered. Yes?
Well, one of the things I thought about in the context of the problem you just mentioned is the possibility of levying the tax on the holder of the mortgage rather than the holder of the title.
Sorry?
Could we levy the tax on the holder of the mortgage rather than the holder of the title?
Yes, but who runs the country? The country is run by the banks.
Yeah, well,
They are not going to tax themselves.
but I've also heard that the banks in Spain are in financial difficulty.
Enormous.
And who are their creditors? Who do their banks owe their money to?
They are German banks, French banks, American banks. But the banks do what they want. The banks rule the country. That is the truth. How? Because they give credit to the politicians. The politicians, yes, they have credit. They have all the credit they want. There is no credit for the companies or the small business, but there is a lot of credit for the politicians. So the politicians are not going to take any measure against the banks. The banks in Spain do what they want. They completely rule the country. A German lady, who is a newspaper lady in Spain, wrote an article for the German newspaper that was fantastic. And she said, in Spain the problem is not the retribution of the working people. It's not the salaries. The problem in Spain is that the country is ruled by a political oligarchy in alliance with a financial oligarchy. And they keep a structure of the country that is unbearable. Unbearable. We have a Senate that does nothing. We have 13 defenders of the people in Spain. Nobody pays any attention to any of them. They can protest, but nobody listens. Each defender of the people has secretaries, lawyers, offices, cars. They are good for nothing. We have 13 autonomous communities with parliaments, no? An incredible bureaucratic structure, but the politicians live from that. So bank and politicians work together. And that is the problem why it's so difficult to reform the situation, to change the situation in Spain. It's very difficult. I hope the ambassador is not here. Nobody.
Frank Pedal.
Yes, Frank.
Well, getting back to an earlier question, surely it was mortgage default insurance and the regulations around that allowed the banks to do whatever they wanted.
Sorry, Frank.
Well, did you not have changes in your laws in the last 10 years or so with respect to mortgage default insurance?
Yeah.
And,
There's no mortgage default insurance in Spain.
well, in many countries there is, and that's what allowed the banks to have higher levels of loaning to as house prices went up, they kept lending more money. So it's not the cost of credit per se, it's credit availability that's the main driver of this pricing. This pricing up was surely there must have been some structure like that in Spain that allowed the banks to do what they did. I mean, they're not that nuts to lend money to people they going to give away. Have no chance whatsoever of getting recovery.
There's no in Spain the insurance for bank loans doesn't exist. It's just a life insurance in certain cases. If you contract the insurance with the same bank, of course.
So I don't mean the person there, I mean the bank itself has a systemic mortgage default system, right?
Sorry.
Well, it could go to the taxpayer ultimately, the government, and they would bail out the banks. So some form of mortgage default. In the United States it was mostly privatized, but for instance in Canada, it's mostly the government through an insurance mortgage purchase program. Canada has has the largest and most expensive housing in the world right now. We're all happy there because we're at the top of the bubble. But it's mortgage insurance guaranteed ultimately by the government that allowed us to get there to begin with. It simply wouldn't have happened otherwise. Because the banks wouldn't have lent the money.
It doesn't exist in Spain. I'm sorry to say, but it doesn't exist.
Well, that's incomprehensible to me. The banks are just completely out of it.
Well, the banks know, as it really happened, that when there is a financial crisis, they will get money either from the European Central Bank or from the government. So they are not very, they get money. The banks don't go to failure, don't go to bankruptcy. Not one bank went to bankruptcy in Spain. The European Central Bank gave money to them. And then they got an enormous amount of money, and instead of lending money to the citizens, they buy Spanish bonds. Because the interest of the Spanish bonds is 5%, and it's secure. So that is the situation. The banks are not worried in Spain at all, because they never go to bankruptcy. The citizens pay to the banks through the tax system.
Fernando, several people in our Georgia's community now have talked about the 18-year cycle. Fred Harrison from here in London, Fred Falbury and Mason in the US, Brian Kavanaugh and Phil Anderson in Australia. And we're talking about economies that are sufficiently self-contained that it's possible to talk about an 18-year cycle. Now, in the case of Spain, can that apply, or is Spain sufficiently integrated in the European community that you cannot talk about an 18-year cycle, and it could not be traced back to before the current bubble?
I have studied that problem. I have just wrote an article, and I said that the 18-year cycle is totally applicable to Spain. It is totally applicable. You know, the 18-year cycle has different periods. A first 7 years starting period, then another 7-year period with a final two years of the last 7, which are the crazy period where people buy land at any price, and finally the depression for the last 4 years. Spain is different to other European countries, because I think in no other European country of the large economies, speculation with land has been so terrible. Germany has no land speculation. People don't buy houses, they rent houses. In the Nordic countries, there's very little land speculation. Taxation is there. Not the one we would like, but it's certainly higher than in Spain. Even in Italy, taxation is better than Spain. Not Greece, because Greece has no taxation at all. That was a paradise. Portugal has better taxation than Spain. It also had problems. Spain has an incredible, everything is orientated to favorable land speculation. The politicians get rich with land speculation. Fortunes have been made. How do you explain that the ruling party had 48 million euros in Switzerland saved from illegal commissions? From where the money came? All came from concessions. They have built airports where there are no planes. Now they have built an airport, I think, near Valencia, it is. Near Valencia, Castellón, I think, in Castellón, they built an airport. Fantastic commissions with land. There are no planes. So they are now transforming the airport in a kind of park to visit. But like that, everything is like that. Enormous buildings, enormous things without any utility, just to get the commissions from the land taxations. And also from the constructions, because the builders also pay commissions. Unbelievable. Well,
I think
yes.
this will be the last
Peter,
one.
how are you?
Yeah, good.
That's
There's
one.
going to be a revolution. They're going to be start settling onto unused land.
Well, is it going to be a revolution or not? You know, I always say that there are countries in the world not only me said it, Hegel also said it, and Kant. There are countries in the world that have a kind of leading roles in the world, where things can happen. France is one of those. In France there was a French Revolution, there was the 1968 May. France is a dangerous country for the system because people can react. Russia is another dangerous country. Well, it produced a revolution. You don't know when it can produce another one. Mexico is another country where a revolution based on land happened in 1910. It's a dangerous country for the system. Spain is not so dangerous. Why? Because 1 million people were killed in the Spanish Civil War. And that, people is very afraid that can happen again. All the Georges in Spain, and there were many, were shot or put in prison or exiled. The leading Georges in Spain were shot. They put in prison. Other ones had to escape. Carranza was a leading Georges, went to Argentina. There was in Andalusia, there was a leader, an Andalusian leader that was shot immediately. Others died in prison. 1 million people, 1 million dead people is a lot of people, a lot of people, you know. And then the Spanish people is afraid of a new civil war. So they are reactions. They are reactions, but not the ones you should expect seeing the problems that we see. Cuts in education, cuts in social care. There was the other day a demonstration of disabled people. Disabled people going in chairs by the street of Madrid because they have cut the assistance to disabled people. So there are reactions, but not strenuous, not terrible reactions. I don't think it's going to be a revolution.
Okay,
Besides, I will tell you something.
all right, then then we have to be moving.
Oh, sorry. I continue talking with you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. There was. As we have this focus on Spanish crisis, it made me think about this Chinese character for crisis is the same as challenge. So this is a challenge to us. How do we really get much more effective than we've ever been before in getting the word out to the world about our solutions? That's going to be very key for our strategy session on Sunday afternoon, by the way. Very important part of our conference where we strategize how we're going to move ahead together after this. So I want to thank so much Ian Mason for your magnificent introduction to the conference and to the School of Economic Science here. And thank you again for having our conference in your beautiful building. Thank you, Fernando. The sessions next is going to be about China and thousands of years of land taxation.